So, continuing the talks on paradise, today we're going to be looking at the animals of paradise. But before that, I like to always reflect on a means to enter paradise. And the means to enter paradise today is making much prostration. Kathratu sujood. It's related from a hadith of Rabi'ah ibn Ka'b al-Aslami, that he was with the Prophet ﷺ one night, and he was waiting for him to arise at night in order to present for him his water to perform wudu and the utensils that he needed to relieve himself. Who is Rabi'ah ibn Ka'b? He's a Sahabi that's probably not as well known to people, but Rabi'ah ibn Ka'b was a young man from the tribe of Aslam. And the tribe of Aslam was a tribe between Mecca and Medina. And he asked his parents one day permission if he could make hijrah to be in the company of the Prophet ﷺ in Medina. He was a young lad around the age of 15, and he wanted to leave his homeland and go and serve the Prophet ﷺ. So he went as a 15-year-old lad, hardly owning anything, and he joined the people of Ahlul Suffah. The people of the veranda, the bench, that area of the mosque where the people who had nothing to support themselves would spend. They were like, basically a lot of them were like refugees really. You can imagine it, if a bunch of refugees like Syrians came here, they have nothing, and so the mosque would cater for their needs until they were strong enough and able to support themselves. And Ahlul Suffah, they would come and go, the people that were part of that. But the Prophet ﷺ, he gave these people specific attention. What was that? He educated them. They became scholars. They became learned people of the religion. And so Rabi'ah ibn Ka'b was one of these people. And what he loved to do, he loved to sit outside the house of the Prophet ﷺ before dawn, ready to give him his things. And this is a great lesson for us, and it's important for our youngsters. We give them purpose. We give them things to do. We give them roles and responsibilities and duties so they feel like they've got something they can give, and empower them as well. Look, these two parents, they sent their own child away in order to be mentored. And this is one of the things that our community needs more than anything, is mentors for our children who they can relate to and they could look up to. Like I look at an example in my own life. My parents, my mother and my stepfather, they really wanted me to be a Christian. They raised me as a Christian. I was never interested in the church, really, to be honest. And I left it as quickly as I had the opportunity. But one thing I do remember is that my youth leaders, I had a lot of respect for my youth leaders. And even though I didn't believe in their religion, I still looked up to them. And I took any advice they said to me with seriousness. Like I can even imagine today I can remember my PE teacher, huge guy. He was like the Hulk, and he was a frightening character. He used to throw a few of my friends around actually, and he said to me, "It's weird how this happens, but it's strange how when you say something with seriousness and sincerity, though, what an impact it has on a young person." He said, and obviously it's not said, but he didn't say it with compassion, but it still had an impact on me. He says, "If I see any of you smoking outside of school, I'm going to break your legs," he said. And I went, "Oh, right." And even then, every so often, I dabbled in a bit of smoking, but I always had that in the back of my mind, that seed in my mind, that this wasn't the good thing to do. So you don't know, when you say something to a youngster, and you say it with sincerity from your heart, like even though he was a bit rough, you could tell that he meant it, and it was said from a place of like concern for us, that sowed a seed that I shouldn't really be dabbling in this. And the other thing was my youth leaders. And so it's really important. What do our youth want from us more than anything? Even if they sometimes dismiss us, deep down they need direction, and they want direction. And so the Prophet ﷺ had the youngsters around him, and he would give them tasks in order for them to carry out. And one night, he came to the Prophet, and the Prophet had such such love for Rabi'ah ibn Ka'b that he turned to him. He says, "Rabi'ah, ask me anything you want." He says, "Ask now. This is a moment of your prayers being answered." And the Prophet Rabi'ah says, "O Messenger of Allah, all I want is your company in paradise." He said, "Is that it?" Is that what you want? Anything else? And that's all I want. He said, then help me out. This is really interesting. The Prophet ﷺ could have simply just made dua for him and said, Allah give him the company of me in paradise. But he said, help me out, O Rabi'ah. And this is an important thing, is giving people, youngsters, purpose. Is he says, help me, a'inni. He says, help me in this matter by doing kathratu sujood. He said, by doing much prostration to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so showing that yes, dua is important, and we make dua for one another. At the same time, you've got to put your effort in a way. It's not just, yo bro, make dua for me. You know, that's a place of, it was I was once at a wedding, and this guy was cussing on the wedding table, and his boy was there, and I felt really embarrassed. He was just expletives coming out of his mouth, and I said to him, come on bro. I said, God, your kid's there, and you're just flying out these expletives. I said, where are you going? He goes, make dua for me, bro. Yeah. Yeah. And at that moment, I just went, but I should have embarrassed him. I should have stood up in front of everyone and say, Allah, sort this guy's tongue out. I should have gone for it, bro. I had 2 minutes going for it to embarrass him in front of his boy. But anyway, I said, just sort yourself out, will you? So this is one of the ways, the means of paradise, is that we do extra worship for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and submit to him. Now, what we're going to look at is the animals in paradise. Now, I find isn't it strange, is that in this world we have animals, and even in paradise we're going to have animals. So it shows the intimate relationship that animals have with the human being. And one thing, this is my little, I'm generalising hugely here, is I've noticed, I don't think the Pakistani guys from back home, they've got no issue with animals. But the youngsters that are brought up here, I don't know what's wrong with them. You see this big burly guy that goes to the gym with his t-shirt ripping because of his muscles, and a little puddy cat comes along and he jumps up like an elephant to a mouse. I don't know, I'm trying to still fathom why burly Pakistani lads are terrified of dogs and cats. Yeah, well, can anyone explain it to me? I think their mothers just made them paranoid, saying it's dirty. Right? I don't know, but I'm sure the Pakistani guys back home, they're not scared of cats and dogs, are they? So I don't know what's happened to this second generation. But they're going to be in paradise, so you better get used to them. Well, not cats and dogs, but it shows that animals and human beings have a very intimate relationship with one another. And also what I feel from this is it's important for your children to be around animals, because it encourages them to have compassion and how to raise an animal and look after it and take care of it and to connect to another. And they found, people that suffer from really bad trauma, they have, one of the reasons that some people get traumatized in their life is because they don't have safe relationships. They just don't feel they can connect to one another. You'll notice people that are really shut down. They can't look at other people in the eye. Have you ever noticed that about some people? They're really apprehensive to connect with somebody, and they don't feel safe in their relationships because they're always criticized and they're always put down. And so what they do in people that can't seem to connect with a human being, do you know what they do? They do horse therapy. Have you heard about this? So it's called equestrian therapy. They get because they feel safe with an animal, so they will spend time with the animal, look it in the eyes and stroke it, and they develop a relationship until they can learn to actually connect with another, and then they come to be able to connect with other human beings. These are people who are very highly traumatized in their lives. And the two animals that they actually use this for are horses, and do you know what the other animal is that can connect to the human being better than, Do you know? Anyone? Dogs. Yeah. Dogs and horses have a very special relationship with human beings. They say that dogs and horses can actually read the emotions of another human being. They can sense them. Have you ever noticed? I mean, I've got a cat. My cat does. She just walks in and goes, and then jumps on my lap, hits my head, stroke me. So she doesn't have any compassion, my cat. She just tells me, get on with it, stroke me. Yeah. But dogs and horses, they have a sense of sensing into the human being, connecting with them. They've got a very unique relationship with humans. And so this is animals, and they are going to be in paradise. And we know that the Prophet ﷺ had a very intimate relationship with animals. He used to name his animals. He didn't just name his animals. The Prophet ﷺ used to actually name even his possessions. He used to have, imagine his t-shirt, he had this, like a t-shirt, you'd have a name for it. How are you doing, I don't know what you call your t-shirt, Tony, yeah? How are you doing, Tony? I'm going to put you on today. He had that sort of intimate relationship with his clothes, with animals and so forth. We know that the Prophet ﷺ loved cats. We know that he had compassion. He was worried about the concerns for the dog and the cat. And he had many hadith about, the woman that gave drink to the dog that was dying of thirst, the woman that tortured the cat and she went to hell because of it. He taught the Sahaba to have concern for animals. And we're going to see some examples, some beautiful examples of this actually. And so, what animals will be in paradise? The only Quranic verse we have about animals in paradise is in Surah Waqi'ah. He says, وَلَحْمِ طَيْرٍ مِمَّا يَشْتَهُونَ, and flesh and meat of birds. And he leaves it indefinite, like wondrous birds beyond your imagination. What will those birds be, those flying creatures? مِمَّا يَشْتَهُونَ, whatever they desire, from what they desire. You will desire a bird. If everyone's familiar with the hadith, the birds of the paradise will be flying over and you'll decide, you go, oh, I bet that looks tasty. And all of a sudden, it will fall down onto your plate. You'll gorge on that animal. And then as soon as you finish it, it turns back and transforms back into the bird and flies away. And so the chicken gets to live again. Okay? Imagine that at Bukhara's. Okay? Yeah. So I've just been to Bukhara's today, so I can relate. Now, what are the birds like in paradise? The Prophet ﷺ, Anas relates, that he asked the Prophet, tell me about Al-Kawthar, the pool of the Prophet ﷺ, the river of the Prophet ﷺ in paradise. He says, it's a river that I have been bequeathed, that I've been gifted by God, that is white, that is as white as milk, and is as sweet as honey. And there, by that river, you will find birds with necks like camels. Huge birds. And then Umar said, whoa, how delightful. He said, and then the Prophet ﷺ says, they taste even better. Like basically, they look nice, guess what? They taste even sweeter. And so, we have these huge birds in paradise. And we know also, it's narrated, that the martyrs, those who were killed, that gave their lives to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that their souls will fly around in the birds of paradise, in the trees of paradise. And so we have flying creatures in paradise, not just birds, we have moths. It's related to the Prophet ﷺ. When he went into the seventh heaven, he was by the lotus tree, the Sidratul Muntaha of the furthest limits, and he saw the leaves on the trees. And I talked about this in the last lecture that's on YouTube, is that the leaves turn technicoloured, and then the leaves, as they change colour, these gold moths, flying insects, fly around them. So we have birds, and we have insects as well. So these are the animals that fly. What about the animals on the earth that will be there? The first, we have horses. And as I said, horses have a very special relationship with man. We can't relate to that as much anymore because we don't use horses. What do we have? We have our cars, okay? And so horses for man the horse was a symbol of freedom. It was a symbol of getting away from and like just running into the fields of your horse and your hair flowing and getting away from all your family problems. Okay, that was the Bedouin on his horse, just rushing out, feeling free. Today we do that with our super Audis. Yeah, you see these rude boys. What are they doing? They're driving around the street saying, "Oh, get away from all my family issues. I'm going to rev my car up round Nelson and show everyone. Look at me, look at me engine." Okay, that's what the Arabs used to do with their horses. Now we do it with our Audis and our BMWs and a Mercedes and so forth. And guess what? A man came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, will there be horses in the garden? So notice this, the Arabs had this huge connection to their horses, to a point where they knew their lineage. They would know the lineage of their horses going back. And now notice the answer of the Prophet ﷺ. So I notice children that don't know, they ask questions, will this be in paradise, will that be in paradise? So a man says, I love my horses. Paradise won't be paradise without me horses. And so, will there be horses in paradise, O Messenger of Allah? First of all, notice how the Prophet ﷺ answers this. He says, if Allah grants you entry, so that's the first point. So and that's sort of inspiring, say, work for it, my boy, work for it. He says, if Allah grants you entry, you will be carried. So first of all, you're going to be carried. Not just you won't have horses, you're going to be carried on a horse, guess what? Of red ruby. So you know that Ferrari, the red Ferrari, you get red horses in paradise. Maybe you get red Ferrari, who knows? Okay. And now, what does that horse do with you? It flies you wherever you wish to go. And there's some narrations that say these horses have wings made of gold. So this is some fly car, this, literally. And what's the point of the steeds of paradise, horses, is that they carry you to your, you go from your property to go visit your friends on your motor, just to show off. You say, look at me horse, look, and what's your horse like? And then you go and visit your friends in paradise on these. And then another man stood up, and this is very interesting, the way the Prophet ﷺ responded to this. Another man stood up and said, will there be camels in the garden, O Messenger of Allah? Because he loved camels. Remember, camels were like even better than horses for the Arabs, because they could get you through the desert, they needed little provision, you could take their milk, you can take their meat, their hair, everything. So they were of great benefit to the Arabs. And the Prophet ﷺ, he did not reply. This is a very interesting tactic of the Prophet ﷺ. Sometimes he didn't reply because he didn't want to mention something that he didn't have revelation about. So he would wait, he wouldn't answer someone, and he'd see maybe revelation may come about this. And then he paused, and then the man asked again, and the Prophet ﷺ said, if Allah grants you entry, again, you will. Now, this is very interesting. He doesn't answer him directly. He says, you will have what your soul desires and what pleases your eye. So this is very, I really find this fascinating, this answer, because a lot of kids, if you teach in a madrasa, that I did for many years, I did my time, and kids were asking all sorts of questions, weren't they? They'll say, will there be chocolate in paradise? Will there be this in paradise? Will there be that in paradise? And the best answer is here, as the Prophet ﷺ said, if there's no details about it, you say, guess what? Whatever your soul desires and whatever pleases your eye, you're going to see it in paradise. Because then it leaves it general. And then, because biologically in paradise, and people have a het up about paradise. Some people say, in paradise, am I going to have to remain married to her? Okay, or the other way round, in paradise, is he going to be my husband? Okay, and people literally get distressed about paradise because they're thinking, I don't want to be with them anymore. And so, but what we got, this is what we answer, and you'll get some. I've had some weird questions asked me about paradise, I tell you. But all you do, this is the answer. Whatever you will be given your heart's desire, and you'll be given whatever pleases your eye, and leave it at that. Because that's the reality of paradise, because Allah knows what's good and what's going to please you. And so yes, the strongest narration is that there will be horses and camels in paradise. There is one hadith that actually says only birds and camels will be in the paradise, but that's a weak tradition. The strongest one is that we will have birds, we will have the moths, we will have horses, and we will have camels. We will not just have those, we will also have sheep and goats. This is a weaker narration. Allah knows best. The Prophet ﷺ, he had a special relationship with sheep, because we know that the Prophet ﷺ, he was a shepherd, didn't he? He used to shepherd, he used to herd sheep when he was a young lad. And the Prophet, there's some really interesting hadith about sheep. The Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith, "Sallu fi mirahil ghanam." He said, pray in the meadows of sheep. Before the Prophet had a mosque, they would pray in the meadows of the sheep. But he forbade the people from praying in where the camels rest. Maybe there's more, obviously, filth with camels because they're larger animals. Allah knows best. But sheep are symbolic. What do sheep symbolize? They're innocent, aren't they? You look at a sheep, there's an innocence, a purity, a simplicity. and as if they also teach you also how to, with shepherding, they teach you how to understand different personalities and realize that you have to take responsibility and lead people, because if you lead a sheep to his own volition, to his own desires, you end up probably getting caught by a fox or a wolf. And so the Prophet ﷺ loved sheep very much. And he said, pray in the meadows of the sheep. And this is a beautiful thing. And he said, and wipe the filth off their mouths, basically. Look at that. You know, that's the concern that the Arabs had for their animals. They want to keep them clean and nice. Probably because they represent them. Well, my sheep have got to look nice, so I look good as well. And we see this, and I think this is really beautiful, because you know, if you've raised an animal and you fed it and took care of it until it grew up, and then you take its life because you're going to eat it, you appreciate that meat now, because it's something very special to you. I remember hearing about, you know, when the foot and mouth broke out in the north of England, they had to kill their flock, weren't they? These farmers were like heartbroken, not just because of the financial loss, but these are their animals. And so when you're around animals, and this is a problem, we're not around animals anymore. People who have lived in Pakistan and so forth, they can relate to this. Is that it breeds a different kind of personality of someone who's always around animals and interacts with them. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, wipe away. He says, for verily the sheep are from the animals of the garden, he said. And then he also described that praying in these areas where the sheep are, there's barakah in them, as if they have a barakah to the sheep. And so now when I go over from Lancashire to Yorkshire and I see those sheep run out into the fields, Allahu Akbar, and pray. Yeah. And so the Prophet ﷺ says, sheep are from the animals of the garden, which is in a weak hadith related to Ibn Majah. And then the Prophet also said in a weak hadith, treat goats well and do not harm them, or in another narration, keep them clean, for they are from the animals of the garden. And we know that obviously when Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam went to sacrifice his son, what was it replaced by? It was replaced by a ram. Okay, and it's related from Ibn Abbas that ram had grazed in paradise for 40 years before it was gifted. So this was a grass-fed organic ram. Okay, so this is another thing. What's about I forgot to mention about the birds. The birds, the Prophet also mentioned they've drunk from the springs and the rivers of paradise. So think, when you eat them, you're not just getting the nutrition of their meat, you're getting nutrition from what they've eaten from as well. And that's a very important lesson. You are what you eat, and the animals are what they eat as well. And unfortunately, in this day and age, people don't consider these things. We live in a day and age where meat is considered as if it's not even that valuable. So that we would throw, a bit of chicken, well, I don't want to eat that, and I just throw it away. But this is an animal that's given its life for you. It's sacrificed itself and given itself to you. That requires and demands an element of respect for it. And so I always say with our children, if they don't finish their plates, say no problem, you put it in the fridge and you say you'll be eating it the next meal. Okay, don't get them used to just having fresh, they expect it to be freshly cooked every meal for me. Okay, rather, if they can't finish their food, no problem. You probably put too much on the plate in the first place, but they have to finish what they eat, even if it's later. This is something we really have to instill in our community about the importance of food, especially if it's meat from an animal, and also to appreciate what that animals come from. And one of the beautiful traditions, the uncles that used to come in the early days, you used to go to the farms, didn't you? The farmers' markets, and get your chickens and slaughter them in your own back garden, so you knew where your animal had been from. Now, honestly, I don't, personally, it's my own personal opinion, I don't eat these chicken, because they go on these conveyor belts. It's awful, the conditions these chickens are placed in. At least when you buy that chicken, you slaughter yourself, you know where it's come from, or at least go organic. You say, well, God, it's expensive, but you appreciate it then. You won't let your kid throw it in the bin, I tell you, when you've paid that much money for it. So, this is very, very important. And then, and I forgot as well, is that there's a beautiful narration about a horse in paradise. Ibn Mubarak, who was a famous scholar in the early generations, Ibn Mubarak, he went on jihad, and he was in a battle, and he saw this man crying. They were resting, and he saw this man crying. He says, "What's the matter?" He says, "My horse has died." And because this was his steed, this was his Audi, this was his BMW. So he was crying, it's broken down, it's dead, that's it. And Ibn Mubarak saw it and he had pity on him. He said, I'll buy it off you. He says, I'll give you 400 dinars, I think I've got here, or dirhams, gold coins or silver coins. And the man said, and it made the man feel better. And probably thinking, Ibn Mubarak, why did you buy this dead horse? What are you going to do with it? He says, no, I'll buy it. That night that man had a dream, and he was on the day of resurrection. And he saw his horse in the garden, and behind that horse was 700 other horses, as if he's the leader of the horses. And he went to go near the horse to take it and say how beautiful this horse is, and a voice cried out, leave that alone, that's Ibn Mubarak's. And he woke up and he went to Ibn Mubarak and he related to him that dream. He says, I want to buy your horse back off, I want my horse back. He says, I'll buy it back off you. And Ibn Mubarak goes, no. He says, you're not having it back now you know its value. And he says, and guess what? He said, what? He says, that dream you had of that in paradise, I saw it in waking state. He saw that, that's why he bought it. He realized, Allah revealed to him that horse in waking state, that horse will be with him in paradise behind in front of 700 other horses. We have a narration where a man came to the Prophet ﷺ with a camel to the emissary of Allah and said, I want to give this fi sabilillah, i.e. in those days, remember, there was no state army, and so people went on to fend the Muslims out of their goodwill. And people had to donate to the army in order to finance it, for the horses, the food, the armour. It's very, very expensive. And the famous story about Tabuk, where Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu just kept giving and giving and giving in order to finance the army. And a man came to give a camel away for that cause, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told him, you'll have 700 of its like in the garden, he said, for giving out this. So when we sacrifice, we get so much more. As I was just listening to a beautiful hadith today about the Battle of Tabuk. This man came crying to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was from the Ash'ariyin, Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. They were from Yemen, and they came to Medina, and they were poor. They had nothing, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam couldn't help them, so he couldn't support them for to go on the Battle of Tabuk. And they were so upset. And one man was really upset. And that night he cried to the Prophet, he cried to Allah, and he said, oh Allah, if I had enough means, I would go on this battle, and I would actually supply the whole of the army as well. And then he woke in the morning, went to pray, and the Prophet ﷺ stood up in front of everyone at the prayer, and he says, who's that man that gave charity last night? No. And the man said, it's a vague question. He said he left it, and he just went. He went back that night. He made dua again, and the next day, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Who's that man that gave out all that charity last night?" And he said, "Are you speaking about me, O Messenger of Allah?" And he explained to him, last night I spent, and I said I would, if I had the money, I would go on I would participate in this battle, and I'd supply everybody. And he says, "You've got what you wished for," he said. Basically, just for that intention, if I had the opportunity, I would do it. The Prophet says, so you'll see that in paradise. Just that. And what else do we have? It's narrated as well that there will be a bull in paradise. When the people enter, a man came to the Prophet ﷺ, he was a rabbi came to the Prophet, and he said, "Oh Muhammad," he said to him, he said, "what will be the first thing the people of paradise will dine on?" And one of the Sahaba, Thawban who was a servant of the Prophet ﷺ, he got really angry, he pushed the rabbi back. He says, "How dare you speak to the Prophet ﷺ in such a rude manner?" And the Prophet said, "Thawban, just calm down. And he says, "Go and ask your question." He said, "Oh Muhammad," he said, what will you be the first thing that the people of paradise dine on?" The rabbis used to love asking these questions because they had information about the next life, and they wanted to test the Prophet ﷺ to see if he had this information that they had. And he said the first thing would be the liver of a fish. Very strange. Okay, that they would dine on and not just the whole liver, that there's this like special delicacy, the tip of the liver. He said after that there will be a bull, a male cow that has grazed on the outskirts of the paradise. Remember, that's where if you think of a garden, that's where it's not been tended to. It's really thick and lush, and so it's grazed for what do you have here? It's been grazing for, I don't know how many years it's mentioned here. No, it doesn't mention. So he said that will be slaughtered, the animal, and that will be fed to the people of paradise. That's real grass-fed, organic. Okay. Yep, I think that's all of them. Yep, so these are the animals that we will see and we will live with and we will ride in paradise. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the company of those animals in paradise and us to appreciate the blessing of animals in this life and the next.